This is NDTV, and you're watching Classics.
Hello and welcome to Walk the Talk. I am Shekhar Gupta, and my guest today is US Ambassador Robert Blackwill. He's made a big difference in what actually is a relatively short tenure. He now goes back, but it's not quite fair to call him the outgoing US Ambassador because he goes back in a position, I believe, or I'm told, in the White House, although these are still rumors and not confirmed, where his playground, his policy playground will be a much wider one. Although whatever it is, I'm sure India will have a very special position on it. Welcome to Walk the Talk, Ambassador Blackwill.
Good to be here, Shekhar. I'm sorry about this weather. I couldn't make it as sunny as I wish it were, and so we're probably going to get wet here during this time, but I look forward to the chat with
anything
you.
that goes wrong, Americans must be to blame. If we have floods, Americans have got something wrong. If we had a couple of years of drought, Americans must have had something to do with it.
Well, who complains about the monsoon in India? Nobody who's sensible. So.
Well, it's on a auspicious note on which we are beginning, on which actually you are taking up your new assignment, because in India, monsoon's very auspicious, and you've been here for 2 years. You haven't seen a monsoon like this.
No, in fact, last summer, of course, we were pretty busy doing other things, including trying to help prevent a war in South Asia, and the monsoon never reached Delhi, as far as I could tell, last year. So it's great to see it this year, and also to know what effects it has on the Indian economy and on the ordinary lives of Indians. So I'm delighted. We'll put up with the rain and do the best we can.
We organized it just for you because no understanding of India is complete without understanding the monsoon.
Right.
But you talked about last monsoon. Around this time, we were quite close to a war in the subcontinent.
We were. At the time, there was some controversy about that, and were we close, and was it right for the United States and the Bush administration to be as concerned about as we were? But since then, I think it's now a matter of record that both the Prime Minister of India, the President of Pakistan have said in public we were close to conflict, and several senior Indian government officials.
We've had the Indian National Security Advisor say on this program that at least twice last year we came very close to war.
Right, in January and again in June. I think we did come close to war.
But it was in June, I think, that you issued your famous travel advisories.
It's the end of May.
End of May, yes.
Made me the most popular man in India, right?
Yes, indeed. But what exactly happened? You know, there are lots of questions.
Well,
and
here's
doubts.
what happened. As we went on from mid-May, it was clear to me that the tensions were rising, and as Rajesh Mishra told you, we were getting closer to war. My responsibility in the first instance as American ambassador to India is not the high politics. My responsibility is the safety of the 60,000 or so American citizens, 60 to 70,000 American citizens who live in India. And you had a situation in which there were rising tensions between India and Pakistan, the possibility of a war, and it would have been the first major war in human history between two nuclear weapon states, which added a brand new dimension. And so I made the decision to recommend to Washington this travel advisory, and I have to say, I don't have second thoughts about it. I think that was my responsibility, which was to protect American citizens here.
So this was a step only taken to protect American citizens, and not as something to build pressure here. That look, guys, if you go to war, you lose out on all this.
No.
You are now globalizing economies.
That had nothing to do with it. And when historians get at the record and see the messages that went back and forth between myself and the top of the Bush administration, it had nothing to do with it whatsoever.
That'll be 30 years from now.
Yes, well, probably on this subject sooner. But let me tell you, when I had my last meeting with the president before I came out here in the Oval Office, his last words to me were, "Take care of our people out there. Take care of our people." And so that's what I was doing.
You mean he was that concerned?
Well, I think he says that probably to any American ambassador who goes out in a place where there could be problems. So I don't think it was particularly devoted to me, but it shows his constitutional obligation to protect and defend the people of the United States, and he was conveying it to me as well.
I've heard Tom Friedman, the famous New York Times columnist, say this. In fact, he said this at a CII meeting in Delhi. He said, if you want to become the back office of the world, you cannot think of nuclear war. You cannot think of war. And he said, in fact, that it dawned on policymakers in the subcontinent as to what a war could cost the moment you issued your travel advisories and people began to go back. So it had an impact.
Well, I wasn't speaking about whether it had an impact or not, although I'll give you my own view for what it's worth. I don't think that that travel advisory had a major impact on the way the crisis came out. What prevented conflict, I think, and I think that in my own view, the two sides were headed for it, was an assurance that Deputy Secretary Armitage brought from President Musharraf that he was going to end cross-border terrorist infiltration against India permanently. And when the Deputy Secretary Armitage brought that here, I think that was the crucial moment when India stepped back to see if that commitment was going to be met. So I don't think, I know Tom Friedman, who's a good friend of mine, terrific guy, I know his view is that that advisory had more influence than I actually think it did on this particular question we're discussing, which is war and peace.
Did you get a sense on some days or maybe at some moments in that phase or maybe in those 2 weeks that a war was imminent, that India had made up its mind?
Well, no, not that India had made up its mind, and of course it was really the Prime Minister making up his mind. My experience is that politicians never decide today what they can decide tomorrow with more information.
Right.
So I don't believe that a decision was ever made. That is to say, on next Thursday or whatever, we're going to act. But I think that the government of India was very close to making such a decision. And I think if the trend line had continued the way it was going, I think it likely would have made such a decision. But it didn't make one because, as I say, American diplomacy, and I'm very proud of this actually, the American diplomacy helped the two sides step back from the brink.